Hello everyone, this is Unit 1, Chapter number 1 with Introduction to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. First point is Introduction to Linux. Everyone knows that Linux is an operating system, right? So it is open source, Unix like operating system. So what is mean the open source? Normally open source means what? Yes, freely available on the internet. Anyone can download it freely, easily. Anyone can change the source code, right? So that's why Linux is an means anyone can change the code in the Linux operating system. So it is an open source, Unix like operating system. So Linux operating system is based on the Unix operating system. Means with the help of the Unix code, this Linux operating system is developed, right? So Unix like operating system. Linux, that is a family of open source Unix like operating system. So as an operating system, Linux kernel first released on September 17, 1991 by Linus Torvald. So again, the Linux is a multi-user and multitasking system. So multi-user or multitasking, so multi, that means of more than one, right? So more than one user can perform, can log in with the same system, with the single system at the same time. So more than one user can perform his a task on a single system at the same time also. Same the multitasking tasking means a processes, right? So more than one process can execute at the same time. Okay, then use of Linux. Initially Linux is created or developed for personal computers only. Gradually it is used in other machines like servers, mainframes computers, supercomputers, etc. But nowadays Linux is also used in embedded system also, like routers, automation controls, televisions, means our smart TVs, right? Then digital video recorders, video game consoles, smart watches. Many number of examples are there for this Linux operating system are in used, right? Now it is the biggest success of Linux, that is of Android operating system. It is based on the Linux kernel that is running on our smartphones and tablets. Then Linux is typically packaged in a Linux distribution, right? Means now what is means this Linux distributions, right? So simply you can say distribution contains the Linux kernel. Yes, of course Linux kernel is there, right? But with this Linux kernel supporting libraries and software, means that a kernel bundles with the supporting libraries and the software which is used for the to execute the Linux operating system, which is used to run the different softwares on the Linux operating system, right? Then Linux distributions, maybe RPM based or Debian based. RPM, that is a Red Hat package manager. Okay, so RPM based operating system it contains the Red Hat operating system, means Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which we call RHEL, right? Then Fedora operating system, Saint operating system, OpenSUSE operating system. Okay, then a Debian based operating system means mostly used the Ubuntu, Ubuntu operating system. Then Kali Linux operating system, Backtrack operating system, which is based on the Debian based operating system. Next, that is the history of Linux. Okay, so Linux began in 1991 as a personal project, okay, by the Finnish student, that is Linus Torvald. Okay, he creates a new free operating system kernel that we call Linux. So in 1991, while he is studying in computer science at University of Helsinki, right, Linus Torvald began a project that later became a Linux kernel, which we call a Linux operating system. Okay, so Linus Torvald writes the code for Linux. Next, that is the features of Linux. Linux has three major parts, that is Linux kernel, graphical environment, and file management. Okay, so what is the Linux kernel? Normally kernel is the major part, or we can say a core of any operating system. Okay, or we can say the heart of operating system, that is of kernel. Okay, so kernel acts as a mediator between the hardware and the software. Okay, so it will provide the interface in between the hardware and software. Means in short, it can manage the system hardware and system software and user software also. Okay, so it will provide the interface in between hardware and software. That software may be system softwares or a user softwares. Then again, the kernel is responsible for running programs, managing devices such as the input output. So kernel basically responsible for several major functions such as memory management, software management, hardware management, and file system management also managed by the Linux kernel. Then second, there is a graphical environment. There is the GUI, graphical user interface, which is again most important features of Linux is in a Red Hat Enterprise Linux also. Okay, so GUI based operating system. GUI, in short, you can say the look and feel of the system also, right? Then third is the file management. File management means manage the different files, which is, means in short the organize the files which is stored on the system, right, on the on a storage device. Okay, so, that's again the means different features like the multitasking and multi user system, which I already explained, right. The next, the advantages of Linux. So many means number of advantages of Linux are there. Mainly, it is an open source operating system. This is the main advantage of Linux, right? It is an open source operating system. Means what? The source code is easily available for everyone, right? Means anyone can download it from the internet, right? Or anyone means anyone can contribute it. Means anyone can change the code in it, okay, modify the code and distribute the code to anyone without any permissions, right. That's why this Linux is called an open source operating system. I will explain this open source operating system in detail in next slide also. Okay, then Linux is a more secure than any other operating system. Means in terms of the security, Linux is a more secure than any other operating system. It's like a Windows system also, right. It does not mean that the Linux is 100% secure, right. It has some malware, but it is a less vulnerable than any other operating system. So normally it does not require any antivirus software. Means if your work is not very professional, right, or organizational level, then yes, without antivirus software also you can use the Linux, right. Then various Linux distributions are available, right. I will explain you in detail in next slides. Means what are the different Linux distributions are available in the market, right. Many of the distributions are freely available, right. Next, that is, it provides the high stability. So stability means it rarely slows down or freeze, okay, and there is no need to reboot it after a short time. Means automatically Linux kernel manage that the slows down problems, okay. Again, it maintains the privacy of the users, right. See, in the Linux, whatever the user related data, even the passwords, means a login credentials related data of the users, and also stored it in the encrypted format, so it maintains the privacy of the users also. Like a number of advantages of Linux are there, like it is a network friendly. Then the whatever the performance of the Linux is much higher than the any other operating system. It again, it allows a large number of people to work at the same time. Means whatever that I explained the features, like Linux is a multi-user system, right. Means it allows a large number of users to work at the same time, okay, and automatically it handles them efficiently also. Then the flexibility of Linux is very high. There is no need to install a complete Linux suite. Means as the whatever the need, whatever the requirement of the user, only the user can install and work on the Linux operating system, right. Again, it compatible with the large number of file system format. Like a number of advantages of Linux are there, right. Then with disadvantages, yes, disadvantages of Linux are also there. There are few disadvantages. The biggest disadvantages, that would be a lack of driver support, right. It is not much user friendly, so it may be confusing for the beginners, right. So this, actually this is not a disadvantage, but means whatever that is confusing for the beginners only, right. It has small peripheral hardware drivers as compared to Windows, so that is the disadvantages of Linux. Now see the distributions of Linux. So So number of distributions of Linux are there, like a Red Hat Enterprise Linux RHEL, then Debian, Caldera, Ubuntu, Fedora, Saint operating system, like number of other distributions of Linux operating systems are there. SUSE, Turbo Linux are also there, right? Poppy Linux are also there, Mandrake, Slackware, SUSE operating system, number of distributions of Linux is available in the market, right? I will explain in very short what is that. Okay, so RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So RHEL is a universal distributor since it contains all the feature of the Linux. Actually, it is targeted for the commercial markets now, right? So Red Hat invented the RPM package, that is Red Hat Package Manager, to manage the softwares, means installing and uninstalling, so managing the softwares, right? Then Debian Linux, this mostly carries a GNU. So this was used as a non-commercial operating system. Then Caldera was initiated in 1997 for the commercial world, means only for the commercial areas. Then next is the Ubuntu, which is mostly means probably a well-known operating system. Well-known means used, whatever the number of users of Ubuntu is very large. So Ubuntu is based on the Debian based operating system. Okay, then Fedora is also RPM based operating system. Then strongly focus on a free software, means Fedora operating system strongly focused on the free software. Fedora is again sponsored by the Red Hat, okay, and it is a foundation of the commercial Red Hat Enterprise Linux project. Same like a Fedora, Saint operating system is there also. So Saint OS is a community project that takes the Red Hat Enterprise Linux code, removes all Red Hat trademarks, and makes it available freely in the market and distributed in the market. So these are some distributions of Linux. Now what is the open source Linux? So uh, open source means, yes, of course, freely available on the internet, right? So the only advantage to this is any user in world can observe, can change the code according to the needs, according to the requirements of the user, right? So end user can also change the code, source code, as per the need, right? And error free over the long term. Okay, so it provides it codes free on the internet, so, right? Then OS with a source code means in the market this Linux operating system is available with its a source code, right? Again, if anyone can modify the source code, modify the versions, then that version can be redistributed in the market also. So no needed any permission. Okay, so that's why this is the open source Linux. Okay.